The first mistake Cadet Blake Morrison made was laughing before the old man had even spoken. The simulator room at Fort Ashford Military Academy was cold enough to make breath show near the vents, and the big tactical screen washed everything in a pale blue glow. 30 cadets stood in pressed uniforms, boots lined on the polished floor, eyes sharp with the confidence of people who had never been truly tested outside a classroom. At the front of the room, Samuel Whitmore stood alone in a faded brown field jacket, one hand wrapped around the handle of a plain wooden cane, the other resting near a burned patch sewn above his heart. The patch was old. Its edges were blackened. The letters were barely readable, but they were still there, Iron Ridge. Blake noticed it first. He was 23, tall, clean-cut, top of his class, the kind of cadet instructors called promising and classmates called dangerous. He looked Samuel up and down, from the scuffed shoes to the weathered face to the gray eyes that seemed too still for the room, and his mouth curved into a smile. "Sir," Blake said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "Halloween was last month." A few cadets laughed. Then more joined in. The sound bounced off the glass walls and the steel tables, sharp and easy. Samuel did not smile. He did not frown. He simply looked past Blake at the digital map behind him, where red enemy markers had surrounded a blue convoy inside a narrow mountain pass. The simulation had frozen at the moment of failure. 3 attempts. 3 losses. Captain Owen Pierce stood near the control desk with his arms folded, watching Samuel with a quiet frown. He had invited the old man into the room only because Samuel had arrived early for a memorial ceremony across campus and asked for directions. But when Samuel stopped at the open door and stared at the screen, Pierce had seen something change in his face. Not surprise. Recognition. Blake did not notice. He stepped closer, still wearing that public smile. "Are you lost, sir?" Samuel's eyes remained on the map. "No," his voice was low, dry, and steady. "But they are." The laughter thinned. Blake glanced at the screen, then back at the old man. "That's a graduate-level tactical exercise. No offense, but it's not a tour display." Samuel's thumb moved once across the burned patch. "Terrain doesn't care what level the class is." Someone in the back whispered. Blake heard it and straightened. His pride had been touched. "And what exactly was your rank?" he asked. Samuel finally looked at him. "Command Sergeant Major." The room went quiet for half a second. Then Blake turned to the class with raised eyebrows, as if the old man had just handed him the punchline. "Command Sergeant Major," he repeated. "That's impressive." He tapped the console, pulled up the public service registry, and typed the name Samuel Whitmore onto the large screen for everyone to see. The search wheel spun. A thin electronic hum filled the room. Then the result appeared, partial record found. No public rank confirmation available. Blake's smile widened. "That's strange," he said. "Must be a glitch." The cadets laughed again, but softer this time. Samuel did not look embarrassed. He did not defend himself. He only stared at the map, at the frozen convoy, at the ridge line above the pass where everyone else saw pixels and he seemed to see weather, distance, wind, and memory. Captain Pierce's frown deepened. He had seen old soldiers posture before. Samuel was not posturing. He was standing as if the room had disappeared and only the mountain remained. Blake leaned back against the console. "Well, Command Sergeant Major, since you understand terrain better than the United States Army's training software, maybe you can tell us why my plan failed." Samuel took one slow step toward the screen. His cane clicked once on the floor. The sound cut cleaner than the laughter. He studied the red markers, the blue convoy, the dry wash running west, and the narrow bend at the top of the pass. 5 seconds passed. No more. Then he said, "Because you marched them into a place built to swallow sound." Blake blinked. "Excuse me?" Samuel pointed with one bent finger, not at the enemy, but at an empty strip of ground half a mile from the convoy. You watched the road. You ignored the silence beside it. The room settled into a deeper stillness. Even the vents seemed quieter. Blake forced a laugh, but it came out thin. That's poetic, sir. Not tactical. Samuel turned his gray eyes on him. Run it again. Blake did not move at first. He looked at Samuel as if the old man had asked him to hand over the room. The cadets watched the space between them with the kind of silence that comes right before someone either backs down or makes a mistake. Blake chose the mistake. You want me to rerun a Federal Academy simulation because you have a feeling, he asked. Samuel's expression did not change. No. I want you to rerun it because your people are still trapped. The words landed harder than they should have. Captain Owen Pierce shifted his weight beside the control desk, eyes fixed on Samuel now, no longer on Blake. There was something in the old man's voice that did not belong to a visitor lost on campus. It carried no anger. No need to prove itself. Just wait. Blake gave a short laugh and turned back to the console. Fine. We will entertain this. He tapped the reset command, and the frozen mountain pass came alive again. Blue icons began moving along the road in tight formation, following the route Blake had designed. The red markers waited beyond the ridge line. A digital wind indicator spun lazily from the northwest. Samuel stepped closer to the screen. His cane touched the floor once, then stopped. Cut speed by half. Blake glanced over his shoulder. That burns time. It saves attention. A few cadets exchanged looks. Blake shook his head but entered the adjustment with theatrical irritation, making sure everyone saw him humor the old man. The convoy slowed. Samuel pointed to the dry wash west of the main road. Send 2 scouts there. Not fast. Quiet. Blake smirked. The objective is east. That is why west matters. Captain Pierce's eyes narrowed. He leaned toward the screen. The western wash was not marked as a route. It looked useless, a pale line between rock shelves, the kind of dead ground cadets ignored because the software did not reward curiosity. Blake entered the command anyway, each keystroke sharper than necessary. The 2 blue scout icons separated from the formation and moved into the wash. Nothing happened. Blake opened his mouth, ready to make a joke. Then one red marker shifted. Only one. Barely visible. Samuel saw it. So did Pierce. Pause, Samuel said. Blake froze the simulation. Samuel lifted his hand and traced a small arc in the air. There. They are not blocking the pass. They are steering you into it. The room changed. Not loudly. No one gasped. But shoulders squared. Smiles faded. Cadets leaned forward without realizing it. Blake stared at the screen, jaw tight. That could be random movement. Samuel looked at him. Nothing waiting that patiently is random. Captain Pierce finally spoke. Cadet Morrison, mark that position. Blake hesitated, then obeyed. Pierce stepped closer to Samuel. Sir, how did you catch that? Samuel's eyes drifted to the ridge line on the screen, then past it, as if he could see a cold dawn behind the pixels. Because the road was too clean. No one laughed this time. The vents hummed overhead. Outside the glass wall, a flag snapped in the morning wind, hard and crisp against a pale Virginia sky. Blake felt the room slipping away from him. He had built his reputation in rooms like this, under lights like these, with instructors watching and classmates waiting for him to be right. Samuel Whitmore had taken less than 2 minutes to make his plan look shallow. Blake tapped the console again and forced his voice steady. All right. Since you are guiding the exercise now, what would you do next? Samuel turned back to the map. He pointed to a supply vehicle near the rear of the convoy. Leave that behind. Blake blinked. That is government property. It is a simulation. It is still part of the mission package. Samuel's voice stayed flat. Then make it useful. A low murmur moved through the cadets. Blake's face warmed, but he entered the command. The blue supply icon stopped near a bend in the road. Samuel then pointed to the eastern slope. Move the main group off the road by 100 yards. No radio traffic for 30 seconds. Blake stared. That violates standard communication procedure. Samuel finally turned from the screen and looked directly at him. So does surviving an ambush. The sentence. Cut the room clean. Captain Pierce did not correct him. He did not soften it. He only looked at Blake and said, "Run it." Blake pressed the key. The simulation resumed. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the red markers shifted toward the abandoned supply vehicle, exactly as Samuel had predicted. The main blue convoy slipped off the road, hidden by the slope. The red formation tightened around the wrong target. The objective marker opened on the far side of the pass. One by one, the blue icons moved through. Mission clock, 6 minutes, 42 seconds. Status, complete. The room stared at the screen. Blake's smile was gone. Samuel stepped back, both hands resting on his cane, the burned patch over his heart catching the blue glow. The mountain did most of the work, he said quietly. You just had to stop arguing with it. The mission complete banner stayed on the screen longer than anyone expected, as if the system itself needed a moment to understand what had happened. 6 minutes, 42 seconds. A graduate exercise that had humiliated the top class 3 times had been solved by an old man with scuffed shoes, a plain cane, and a burned patch no one in the room recognized. Blake Morrison stared at the result with his hand still hovering above the console. His jaw tightened. His classmates were no longer looking at the simulation. They were looking at him. That was the part he could not stand. Samuel Whitmore had not celebrated. He had not smiled. He had not even looked satisfied. He simply stood near the front of the room, calm as stone, his gray eyes resting on the digital mountain pass like it was a place he had walked through in another lifetime. Captain Owen Pierce stepped toward the screen. Reset the after-action view, he said. Blake swallowed. Sir, the system must have accepted an exploit. The route he used was not in the recommended options. Pierce did not turn around. That is why I asked for the after-action view. Blake's fingers moved across the keyboard. The map shifted into analysis mode. Blue movement lines appeared, thin and clean. Red response patterns followed, curving toward the decoy supply vehicle exactly as Samuel had predicted. Then the software generated its cold verdict, unconventional route. High terrain awareness. Successful deception. Low casualty risk. A few cadets read the words silently. One of them let out a breath he had been holding. Blake heard it. His face changed. Not much. Just enough. He stepped away from the console and turned toward Samuel with a smile that had lost its warmth. That is a neat trick, he said. Samuel looked at him. No trick. Then maybe you have seen this exercise before. The room tightened again. Captain Pierce finally turned. Careful, cadet. Blake kept his eyes on Samuel. I am just asking a fair question, sir. A civilian visitor walks into a secured training room, solves a restricted scenario in minutes, and claims a rank the public system cannot verify. That is unusual. Samuel gave no answer. Outside, the wind pushed against the building, rattling the tall glass near the flag court. The sound rolled softly through the room, a low pressure behind the silence. Blake took one step closer, encouraged by the old man's quiet. You said Command Sergeant Major. Where did you serve? Samuel's hand moved to the patch. His thumb rested on the scorched edge. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not fear. Not shame. Something older. Something heavier. Pierce saw it and felt a chill he could not explain. Samuel said, "A lot of places that do not show up on welcome signs." Blake gave a short laugh. "That is convenient." A cadet near the second row, Emily Carter, glanced at the patch and narrowed her eyes. She had spent the previous semester helping archive old unit insignia for the Academy Museum. The burned cloth on Samuel's jacket was not official issue. Not exactly. But the shape, the faded black ridge line, the 2 silver stars above it, they felt familiar in a way she could not place. She leaned closer to the cadet beside her and whispered, "Iron Ridge." The words reached Captain Pierce. His eyes shifted at once. "What did you say?" Emily straightened. "Sir, the patch. I think it says Iron Ridge." The name moved through the room like cold air under a door. Most of the cadets did not react. Blake did. He smirked, ready to dismiss it. But Captain Pierce did not. He went still. Years of training records passed through his mind, buried footnotes, restricted case studies, instructor rumors spoken only after doors were closed. Iron Ridge was not listed as a standard operation. It was not taught in full. It appeared only as a warning inside advanced leadership material, when maps fail, when communications thin, when command confidence becomes more dangerous than uncertainty. Pierce looked at Samuel again, and this time his voice changed. Lower. More careful. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "were you at Iron Ridge?" Samuel's eyes stayed on the screen. The blue glow carved deep lines into his face. For 3 long seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked toward the Academy flag outside the glass, snapping hard in the Virginia wind. "That name was never supposed to be used in a classroom," he said. The room lost every remaining trace of laughter. Blake felt it happening, felt the attention leaving him and gathering around the old man. He forced himself back into motion. "Sir, with respect, that still proves nothing. Anyone can repeat a classified-sounding name." Captain Pierce's gaze cut toward him, but Blake had gone too far to stop. Pride had become momentum. He turned to the console and pulled up the personnel verification system again. If Mr. Whitmore is who he says he is, then command records should confirm it. Samuel finally looked at Blake, and the quiet in his eyes made the younger man pause for half a second. "Some doors should stay closed, son." Blake smiled without humor. "Then let us see who locked them." Blake entered Samuel Whitmore's name again, this time with the confidence of a man trying to drag the room back under his control. The letters appeared huge across the tactical screen, bright white against a military gray background, Samuel Whitmore. The cadets watched without moving. Captain Owen Pierce stood beside the console, his face hard, one hand resting near the edge of the desk as if he wanted to stop the search but knew the damage had already begun. Samuel remained where he was, just left of the screen, his cane planted squarely on the polished floor. The blue glow touched the burned Iron Ridge patch over his heart. His thumb was no longer moving across it. That stillness bothered Pierce more than any reaction would have. Blake selected Expanded Service Verification. A warning box appeared. Authorized personnel only. Blake glanced at Pierce. "Sir, as ranking cadet officer for this exercise, I have training access." Pierce's voice was quiet. "Training access is not command access." Blake hesitated, but only for a breath. Then it should deny the request. He pressed enter. The screen flickered. For a moment, the room reflected back on itself in the dark glass. Young faces. Pressed uniforms. Samuel's weathered profile. Then the system returned a result, partial record found. Public record sealed. Blake's lips parted, then tightened. "Sealed does not mean honorable," he said, but the sentence sounded smaller than he intended. Samuel looked at him then, not with anger, not with judgment, but with the tired patience of someone watching a boy strike matches near old paper. "Cadet," Samuel said softly, "you are looking for a trophy in a locked room." Blake's ears reddened. "I am looking for the truth." "No," Samuel said. "You are looking for a way not to apologize." The room absorbed that sentence in silence. Somewhere near the second row, Emily Carter lowered her eyes. Captain Pierce exhaled through his nose and looked at Blake with a warning that did not need words. But Blake had already passed the place where pride could turn around cleanly. He selected Request Command Review. A second warning appeared, longer this time, Restricted File. Command authorization required. Unauthorized access attempts may be logged. Blake forced a laugh. Logged is fine. Pierce stepped forward. "Do not press that key." Blake stopped with his finger above Enter. For the first time, he seemed aware that the room was no longer with him. Not one cadet was smiling now. The earlier laughter felt distant, almost embarrassing, like a noise made by strangers. The simulator's cooling fans hummed beneath the floor panels. Outside, the flag cracked again in the wind. Samuel turned slightly toward the glass. For half a second, the pale Virginia morning vanished behind his eyes. He was not in the room. He was seeing a ridge under a colorless sky, radio static dissolving into wind, young voices trying to sound calm because everyone was listening. No images stayed long. Just fragments. Frost on canvas. A compass needle trembling. A lieutenant with dust on his collar asking which way led out. Samuel blinked once, and the simulator room returned. Blake saw only the old man's silence and mistook it for weakness. "With respect, sir," he said to Pierce, "this is exactly how false claims survive. People get nervous around old uniforms and old stories." Samuel lowered his eyes to the cane in his hand. A uniform can be folded. A story can be polished. But a man's choices keep their shape. Blake pressed Enter. The screen went black. No error message appeared. No denial. Just black. Then a single line of text formed in the center, Request Received. Routing to Command Authority. The cadets looked at one another. Blake's smile faded. "That is new," someone whispered. Captain Pierce moved fast to the console and tried to cancel the request. The system did not respond. Another line appeared, verifying historical restriction code. Pierce's face changed. He knew enough about military systems to know when a door had opened upward instead of outward. This was no longer Academy software. This was moving beyond Fort Ashford. The room lights dimmed automatically as the main display shifted into secure mode. The Academy seal disappeared. In its place came a plain black field and a rotating authentication symbol. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment. Not afraid. Not ashamed. Just weary. Pierce turned to him, his voice barely above the hum. "Mr. Whitmore, who is going to answer this?" Samuel opened his eyes and looked at the screen. Someone who should have let an old man attend a memorial in peace. Blake swallowed. His hands fell away from the keyboard. The screen gave one soft tone. Then another. A third line appeared beneath the authentication symbol, Secure Command Line Establishing. No one breathed loudly now. Even Blake seemed smaller under the glow of what he had summoned. Captain Pierce straightened to attention before the call even connected. The secure screen stayed black for several seconds, and those seconds stretched across the simulator room like a wire pulled tight. Cadet Blake Morrison stood frozen beside the console, his hand still near the key that had started everything. No one looked at him now. Every face in the room had turned toward the main display, where the word Secure Command Line Establishing pulsed in small white letters. Captain Owen Pierce stood at attention, shoulders squared, chin level, his earlier uncertainty gone. He did not know who was coming through that line, but he knew the system had climbed higher than any academy exercise should have reached. Samuel Whitmore remained still. The burned iron ridge patch over his heart looked darker under the dimmed lights, its blackened edges catching faint blue from the screen. His cane rested against his right leg. His left hand hung open at his side, fingers slightly curled, as if he had let go of something no one else could see. A soft tone sounded. Then the display changed. A seal appeared first, not the Academy seal, but a command seal that made Pierce's eyes sharpen. Beneath it, a name formed in block letters, General Thomas R. Callahan. The room seemed to lose all air at once. Blake stared at the rank as if the word had been written directly against his chest. Emily Carter's mouth parted, then closed. Two cadets in the back straightened without being told. Captain Pierce brought his heels together with a quiet click. The camera feed opened. A man in dress uniform appeared from a wood-paneled office, silver hair cut close, face lined by years and command. General Callahan looked down at something off-screen, then lifted his eyes to the camera. "This is General Thomas Callahan," he said. "Who initiated a restricted review on Samuel Whitmore?" Blake tried to answer, but his voice did not rise. Captain Pierce spoke first. "Sir, Captain Owen Pierce, Fort Ashford Military Academy. The request came from our training room during a personnel verification." General Callahan's expression hardened. "That file is not for classroom curiosity, Captain." Pierce did not flinch. "Understood, sir." The general's eyes moved. Across the camera feed, scanning the room. Then he saw Samuel. Everything in his face changed. The command hardness did not disappear, but something older moved beneath it. Recognition. Respect. A kind of pain held in place by discipline. General Callahan stood. The chair behind him rolled back slightly. No one in the simulator room made a sound. The general brought his right hand up in a slow, perfect salute. Not to Captain Pierce. Not to the Academy. Not to the cadets. To Samuel Whitmore. Samuel's gray eyes lowered for a moment. The room watched the impossible become real. Blake's face drained of color. The old man he had mocked, the man whose record he had tried to expose, was being saluted by a four-star general on a secure command line. Samuel did not hurry. He shifted his cane to his left hand, straightened his back, and returned the salute with the quiet precision of a man whose body remembered standards even when age had claimed its share. General Callahan held the salute 1 second longer than protocol required. Then he lowered his hand. His voice came softer than before. "Sergeant Major Whitmore." The title landed in the room like a gavel. No one questioned it. No one breathed against it. Samuel looked at the screen. Thomas. A few cadets glanced at one another. Not General. Not Sir. Thomas. The name carried history. General Callahan accepted it without correction. That told the room more than any explanation could have. Blake took a small step back from the console. The movement was almost invisible, but Pierce saw it. So did Samuel. General Callahan's gaze shifted to Blake. "Cadet, state your name." Blake swallowed. "Cadet Blake Morrison, sir." "Cadet Morrison," the general said, each word measured, "do you understand whose record you attempted to open?" Blake's mouth moved once before sound came. "No, sir. That much is clear." The sentence was calm. It was also final. Samuel lowered his eyes, uncomfortable with the weight gathering around him. He had not come for this. He had come for a memorial, for a name on a wall, for a quiet chair in the back of an auditorium. But pride had opened a door sealed for a reason, and now the past stood on the screen in full uniform. General Callahan looked back at him. "Sam, I am sorry they made you prove what should have been honored." Samuel's jaw tightened slightly. "They are young. So was I, Callahan said. When you found me on that ridge. The room went completely still. General Callahan's last sentence seemed to stop time inside the simulator room. When you found me on that ridge. The words hung beneath the ceiling lights, quiet and impossible, while the cadets stood in a silence that had changed shape. It was no longer the silence of surprise. It was the silence of young people realizing they had been laughing at a door without knowing what stood behind it. Samuel Whitmore looked away from the screen toward the tall glass wall, where the flag outside snapped hard in the Virginia wind. He did not want the room to follow that memory. He did not want 30 cadets staring at him as if pain were a lesson plan. But General Callahan had not spoken to impress them. He had spoken because Blake Morrison had dragged a sealed record into the open and demanded proof from a man who had already paid more than proof should ever cost. Captain Owen Pierce kept his posture rigid, but his eyes had softened. He had trained cadets for 11 years. He knew arrogance. He knew ambition. He knew the clean, dangerous confidence that came from perfect scores and untested judgment. He had seen it in Blake. Now he watched that confidence fold under the weight of one name, Iron Ridge. Blake stood beside the console with his shoulders lower than before. The blue light from the secure screen made him look younger, almost like a boy wearing a uniform he had not grown into yet. General Callahan looked across the feed, his voice steady but no longer cold. Cadet Morrison, Iron Ridge was a leadership failure long before it became a restricted file. Men trusted clean maps. They trusted clear weather reports. They trusted assumptions because assumptions made them feel in control. Blake did not answer. The general continued. Sergeant Major Whitmore did not have command authority that morning. He did not have the highest rank in the valley. He had something rarer. He had the courage to see what others refused to see. Samuel's fingers tightened once around the handle of his cane. A faint tremor passed through his hand, then disappeared. Emily Carter noticed. So did Captain Pierce. Samuel was not embarrassed by praise. He was bracing against memory. The simulator screen behind him still showed the completed exercise, the blue convoy safely passed the virtual pass. To the cadets, it had been a puzzle. To Samuel, it had been a shadow. General Callahan lowered his voice. I was a young lieutenant then. 24 years old. Certain I understood the world because the army had given me bars on my shoulders and men to lead. I thought rank made my judgment heavier. Sergeant Major Whitmore taught me that judgment weighs nothing unless humility carries it. Blake's eyes dropped to the floor. His face had lost the last trace of defiance. Samuel finally turned back toward the screen. Thomas, he said quietly, that is enough. The general paused. The respect between the two men filled the room more powerfully than any order. No, Sam, Callahan said. It was enough when they laughed at your coat. It was enough when they questioned your service. But they opened your record in front of a classroom, so now the classroom will learn why it was sealed. Samuel closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, the gray in them looked older than the academy walls. Outside, the wind moved across the flag court, and for an instant the sound was not Virginia wind anymore. It was thin mountain air. It was static in a radio speaker. It was a young officer trying to keep his voice calm while the world around him stopped making sense. No one in the room saw the full memory. They only saw Samuel's stillness. That was enough. General Callahan looked at the cadets one by one through the camera. Sergeant Major Whitmore walked officers out of confusion that day. He carried discipline when rank broke down. He gave orders men followed not because his title demanded it, but because his voice told them he could see a way through. Blake swallowed. Sir, he said, barely above a whisper, I did not know. Callahan's eyes returned to him. That is not your mistake, cadet. No. One expects you to know every sealed record in this army. Your mistake was deciding ignorance gave you permission to mock a man. The sentence struck without being loud. Blake accepted it without defense. Samuel stepped away from the screen, the cane clicking softly once against the floor. "He is learning," he said. General Callahan looked at him for a long moment. "Then let him learn correctly." The screen changed again. A new line appeared beneath Samuel's sealed profile, "Command Review Active. Authorized by General Thomas R. Callahan." Captain Pierce drew in a slow breath. Blake stared at the words as if the room had tilted beneath him. Samuel did not look at the screen. He looked at the flag outside and whispered, "Some doors do not open. They remember." The new line on the screen did not reveal the whole record. It revealed only enough to make the room understand why the rest remained hidden. Samuel Whitmore's name appeared in full, followed by his confirmed rank, Command Sergeant Major. Beneath it came a list of service dates, commendation references, and blacked-out operation fields that stretched down the screen like closed doors. Every redaction seemed louder than a sentence. Blake Morrison stared at the verified rank until his eyes could no longer pretend not to see it. The old man had told the truth from the beginning. He had told it plainly, without decoration, while Blake had dressed his doubt in confidence and called it leadership. Captain Owen Pierce read the screen with a slow, controlled breath. "Confirmed by command authority," he said, his voice carrying through the room. No one moved. General Callahan looked from the screen to the cadets. "You are seeing a fraction," he said. "Not because Sergeant Major Whitmore has anything to hide, but because some service is buried so others can live without carrying it." Samuel's jaw shifted, and his hand found the burned iron ridge patch again. The cloth looked fragile under his fingers, a small piece of history that had survived more years than many of the cadets had been alive. Emily Carter watched him touch it and felt the shame of her earlier silence. She had laughed with the others, not because she meant harm, but because it had been easier to follow the room than stand apart from it. Now the laughter felt like something spilled on a memorial floor. General Callahan continued, each word slow enough to be remembered. "At Iron Ridge, rank did not save us. Technology did not save us. A perfect plan did not save us. A man who listened to wind, terrain, and fear saved us from our own certainty." Samuel looked down. "Thomas. Let me finish," the general said gently. The softness in his voice made the cadets listen harder. "You never let anyone say it properly." Samuel's eyes stayed lowered, but he did not interrupt again. General Callahan leaned closer to the camera. "That morning, I learned that command is not volume. It is not posture. It is not the ability to embarrass someone with a screen. Command is the discipline to stay calm when others need your calm more than they need your pride." Blake flinched slightly, but he did not look away. The correction was not shouted. That made it worse. It gave him no anger to push against. It left only the truth. The screen scrolled once more, automatically unlocking a command-approved notation. "Limited honor summary available." Captain Pierce turned his eyes to Samuel, silently asking permission. Samuel gave the smallest shake of his head. But the system had already opened the line under General Callahan's authority. A short summary appeared, stripped of location details and protected names. It said Samuel Whitmore had assumed field coordination during a communications failure, redirected separated personnel to safe terrain, maintained order until command recovery, and later declined public recognition due to operational restrictions. No violent detail. No grand myth. Just clean military language, cold enough to hide the cost and honest enough to reveal the man. The cadets read it as if reading a stone inscription. Blake's hands slowly came together in front of him, fingers interlaced, knuckles pale. "Sir," he said to the screen, "I was wrong." General Callahan looked at him. "Yes, you were." Blake swallowed. "I disrespected a senior non-commissioned officer." "No," Callahan said. "You disrespected a man before you knew whether rank protected him." That is the lesson. The room held still around the sentence. Samuel finally lifted his eyes to Blake. There was no victory in them. No satisfaction. Only a tired kind of mercy. "Cadet Morrison," he said, "the army will give you rank if you earn it. Life will test whether you deserve to be followed." Blake's face tightened, but this time from shame, not anger. He nodded once. "Yes, Sergeant Major." The words sounded different now. Not forced. Not mocking. Captain Pierce stepped away from the console and faced the class. His voice carried the command weight Blake had tried to imitate earlier. "All cadets, attention." 30 pairs of boots snapped together against the polished floor. The sound was clean, sharp, and final. Samuel's shoulders rose and fell with a quiet breath. He had come to sit unseen at a memorial, yet the room had placed him at its center. Outside, the flag moved in hard morning wind. Inside, under the blue glow of sealed records and awakened truth, every cadet stood straight before the old soldier they had mistaken for a joke. General Callahan watched from the screen, his face solemn. "Sergeant Major Whitmore," he said, "they are ready to hear you now." Samuel looked at the young faces, at Blake, at the completed mountain simulation behind them. Then he said, "Hearing is easy. Remembering is the hard part." Samuel did not step forward right away. He let the cadet stand in that hard, clean silence until the meaning of it settled deeper than embarrassment. The simulator room still glowed blue behind him, but the exercise no longer mattered. The mountain pass on the screen had become smaller than the lesson inside it. Blake Morrison stood in the front row now, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead, face stripped of every easy smile he had worn before. Samuel looked at him for a long moment, then at the others. "You want to lead soldiers," he said. His voice was low, but every cadet heard it. "Then learn this before you learn anything else. A person is not empty just because your screen has no file on him." No one moved. Captain Owen Pierce stood near the console, silent, letting the words do their work. General Callahan watched from the secure feed, his hands folded in front of him, his expression solemn. Samuel turned slightly toward the completed simulation. "You trusted the road because it was marked. You trusted the plan because it was approved. You trusted the system because it gave you clean answers. That is how good people get lost." The room absorbed each sentence. There was no lecture rhythm in Samuel's voice. No performance. He spoke like a man placing stones on a grave, one at a time, each with care. Experience does not always arrive polished. Sometimes it walks in with a cane. Sometimes it wears an old coat. Sometimes it cannot explain itself because the truth belongs to people who are not in the room anymore. Emily Carter lowered her eyes. Blake swallowed, but he did not look away. Samuel saw that. He saw the shame in him, but also the beginning of something better. Shame could harden a man or open him. Samuel had lived long enough to know the difference was decided in quiet moments. "Cadet Morrison," he said. Blake answered at once. "Yes, Sergeant Major." The words came clean this time. Samuel studied him. "Why did you laugh?" Blake's face tightened. He could have blamed pressure. He could have blamed the class. He could have hidden behind procedure and suspicion. He did none of that. "Because I thought I knew what a soldier was supposed to look like," he said. Samuel nodded once. "And now?" Blake looked at the burned iron ridge patch, then at the sealed record on the screen, then back at Samuel. "Now I think that was the smallest thing I knew." A faint change passed through General Callahan's face, not a smile exactly, but something close to approval. Captain Pierce exhaled quietly. Samuel took the patch between two fingers and unfastened it from his jacket. The cloth came free slowly. Its burned edges curled inward, black and brittle at the corners. For a moment, Samuel held it in his palm as if it weighed more than cloth should. Then he walked to the console, each step marked by the soft click of his cane, and placed the patch beside Blake's hand. Blake looked down at it, startled. "Sergeant Major, I cannot take that. I did not say you could keep it." Samuel's voice remained calm. "I said you could look at it." Blake nodded, humbled. Samuel tapped the table once with his finger. "That patch is not proof of what I did. It is proof of who did not come home to explain it themselves." The cadets stood even straighter. The room felt different now, less like a classroom and more like a chapel built from steel, glass, and silence. General Callahan spoke from the screen. "Captain Pierce." Pierce turned. "Sir. Effective today, Sergeant Major Whitmore's honor summary will be included in your leadership ethics block, with his permission." Samuel looked at Callahan sharply. The general met his gaze. "Only the part that teaches, Sam. Not the part that reopens wounds." Samuel said nothing for a long second. Then he gave the smallest nod. Pierce's voice was steady. "Yes, sir." Blake looked from the patch to Samuel. "Sergeant Major, I owe you an apology in front of everyone." Samuel's eyes rested on him. "Then make it short and make it true." Blake faced him fully. His voice shook, but it did not break. "I mocked you because I was arrogant. I questioned your service because I wanted to be right more than I wanted to be respectful. I am sorry, Sergeant Major." Samuel listened without expression. Then he said, "Do not spend your life apologizing for the same lesson twice." Blake nodded. "I will not." Samuel picked up the Iron Ridge patch and fastened it back onto his jacket. The room watched the old cloth return to its place over his heart. Outside, the wind struck the flag again, bright and sharp against the glass. Captain Pierce turned to the cadets. "Remember this room," he said. "Not the simulation. This room." For several seconds after Captain Pierce spoke, no one moved. "Remember this room." The word stayed in the air while the simulator hummed softly beneath the floor panels and the morning light pushed through the glass wall in pale silver bands. Samuel Whitmore stood at the front, the Iron Ridge patch back over his heart, the cane steady in his right hand. He looked smaller now that the room had stopped challenging him, but somehow larger too, as if respect had changed the space around him without asking permission. General Callahan remained on the secure screen, silent, watching the cadets absorb what no manual could have taught them. Then Captain Pierce turned toward Samuel and brought his heels together. "Sergeant Major," he said, "permission to dismiss the class to the Memorial Hall under your lead." Samuel's eyes moved to the hallway beyond the glass, where a banner for the afternoon ceremony hung in red, white, and blue. He had come there to sit in the back. To hear names read. To leave quietly before anyone asked him too much. "Captain," Samuel said, "I did not come to lead anything today." Pierce did not lower his gaze. "Understood. But they need to learn how to follow." That sentence settled into Blake Morrison harder than any reprimand. He looked at Samuel, then at the patch, then at the floor where his laughter had started less than an hour earlier. The distance between those two moments felt longer than 76 years. Samuel gave a slow nod. Pierce faced the class. Formed two columns. Boots moved at once. No jokes. No whispers. No nervous smiles. 30 cadets arranged themselves with clean precision, but the energy had changed. This was no longer performance. It was attention. Blake stepped into line at the front, then stopped. He looked at Samuel. "Sergeant Major, may I ask one question?" Pierce almost corrected him, but Samuel lifted one hand. "Ask." Blake's voice was quiet. "Why did you not say who you were when we laughed?" Samuel studied him for a long moment. Outside, the flag snapped once in the wind. "Because who I am does not depend on who believes it." Blake's eyes tightened. He nodded once, and this time the lesson stayed. General Callahan spoke from the screen. Samuel turned. The general's voice softened. The memorial board will be updated. Iron Ridge will remain protected, but the men who came home because of you will no longer be the only ones who remember. Samuel looked down, and for the first time all morning, his composure nearly broke. Not much. Just a breath caught behind the ribs. Just the weight of names passing through him. Then he straightened. Make sure the ones who did not come home are remembered first. Callahan nodded. Always. The secure line ended. The screen went dark, leaving only faint reflections of the room, young cadets, a quiet captain, and an old soldier in a worn jacket. Pierce opened the door. The hallway outside smelled faintly of floor wax and winter air carried in from the entrance. As Samuel stepped through, the cadets followed, 2 columns behind him, their boots striking the floor in a measured rhythm. Blake walked first on the left. He did not try to stand out. He matched the pace of the old man's cane, click, step, click, step. Down the corridor, other students turned to look. They saw an elderly visitor leading a class of cadets toward the memorial hall. They did not know why the room had gone silent behind him. They did not know why Captain Pierce walked with his jaw set or why Blake Morrison stared ahead like a man carrying a new responsibility. At the entrance to the memorial hall, Samuel stopped before the wall of names. The brass letters caught the light. Some were familiar. Some had lived only in memory. Samuel removed his cap and held it against his chest. Behind him, without an order, every cadet stood at attention. Blake looked at the wall, then at Samuel. He understood now that rank could be printed, verified, sealed, or hidden, but dignity had to be recognized before it was announced. Samuel lifted his hand in a slow salute. The cadets followed as one. No screen told them to do it. No general watched over them. No system confirmed the moment. It was only a hallway, a wall of names, a winter flag beyond the glass, and the quiet truth that some salutes arrive late, but they still carry the weight of a lifetime.